Right, Year 12, this is lesson 3 for the resources unit. And the aim of this lesson is to have a look at measuring trends in resource consumption, including the resource consumption of the individual, the nation, and global ecological footprints. Okay, so first thing you need to do is open up, there's a document which is called indicators, okay, and have a look at the sheet. And there's 5 indicators on there, and decide which one you think is the best measure of the impact of populations on resources. There's 5 indicators as well, so have a think about why there are so many similar ones, and then have a think about whether or not you still think that GDP is the best measure of development. So here are the indicators. So there's the Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare, or the ISO. It's an economic indicator intended to replace GDP, which is the main macroeconomic indicator of the system of national accounts. So rather than simply adding together all expenditures like GDP, consumer expenditure is balanced by such factors as income distribution and the cost associated with pollution and other unsustainable costs. So those are kind of, in economics, what are referred to as externalities, things that happen not because you intended them to, but they're kind of a side effect, if you will, of something. So things like pollution and inequality, I suppose, could be seen as a side effect of living in a capitalist economy. Then you've got GPI, the Genuine Progress Indicator. So that looks at environmental and social factors as well. It's kind of a green economicsy type thing. It looks at carbon footprints. It looks at resource depletion and long-term environmental damage. So again, a bit of a step forward in terms of not just focusing on wealth, but focusing on the impacts of wealth creation. Then you've got the Happy Planet Index. I imagine it would be quite entertaining to see what all of our Happy Planet indexes were at the moment. So HPI measures things that matter, it says. So long, happy, sustainable lives for the people that live in the countries that are measured. It uses data on life expectancy, experienced well-being, and the ecological footprint. Then we've got the LPI, the Living Planet Index, is an indicator of the state of global biodiversity. So it's more of a kind of biocapacity, biological sort of thing. Looks at trends in populations, abundance of certain animals, and really looks at the impact that humans are having on different ecosystems. And then the last one here, ecological footprint, is the measure of the demand that human activity puts on the biosphere. So it basically measures how much land we need to produce the things that we consume, but also to deal with the waste that we create as a result of that. So it could be like landfill waste, or it could be pollution and all that kind of stuff. So those 5 indicators there, just have a little think about that for a minute. You can pause the video, have a read through them again, and think about the questions that I was asking you, which were these ones here. So which one do you think is the best measure of the impact of populations on resources, and why do you think there are so many similar indicators? And the thing about the isn't GDP the best measure of development? Okay, so hopefully you've had a little think about those indicators. For the purposes of for this IB course in geography, the one that we're really interested in is this ecological footprint here. It's on the next slide. So it's expressed in hectares, which is a measurement of land from the olden days, and it calculates the amount of land needed to maintain your current standards of living. So, and then again, just reiterating, it's the source and the sink of resources. So, how much land do you need to get all the stuff you need, and how much land to get rid of all the junk that you create, and in response to that. So, the picture on the left there, you can see the ecological footprint of Londoners. So, you can see that a lot of the ecological footprint is made up of food, and a lot of it is made up of waste. And surprisingly, not very much is made up of energy or transport, which is kind of different to if we were thinking about carbon footprints, which is something completely different, but is obviously a function of the ecological footprint. So you can see the big footprint there, and it says ecological footprint is to do with the bioproductive land, the bioproductive sea, the energy land, the built land, and the biodiversity of the big toe beans. Next slide, very similar explanation of what the carbon bio footprint is made up of. And there's a bit more definition down there at the bottom for you. What I would like you to do is just follow this link, have a little watch of the video, and if you ever forget the man's name that invented the ecological footprint after watching this, I will be very surprised. Next slide, you can see here there are some graphs that come from the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet Index. There's a link there if you feel like you want to go and have a little look at it some more. Now, if you cast your eyes into the bottom left corner, you will see a little key that says the dark purple colour is world, the pinky purple colour is OECD countries, so there's kind of the wealthier countries. The bricks are the orangey colour, so Brazil, Russia, India and China. And the pink colour, light pink colour is the rest of the world. So you have there 7 graphs. Top left, world population. So you can see the amount of world population that falls into the OECD, the BRICS, and the rest of the world. And from that you can very clearly see that the BRICS, which we have sort of discovered, hopefully this week, are kind of our new middle class, make up quite a large proportion of the world population. Underneath that, we've got a little graph that shows us fertiliser consumption. So fertiliser is an inorganic or organic compound that is used in agriculture to provide specific nutrients, quite often they're nitrogen-based things, to speed up and enhance the growth of plants. And there are some fairly big impacts of using fertilisers. So the nitrogen that's used in them quite often will wash off into water supplies from the agricultural land, and will cause things like eutrophication, where water courses become anoxic, or all of the oxygen is used up by the plants that the fertiliser causes to grow in them. Also, usually what happens when there's a lot of fertiliser use is that the ground becomes what we call denuded, which means that it doesn't have all of its kind of nutrients and stuff in it naturally anymore, because it's been used to just grow one crop over and over and over again, and chemicals have been used to sort of sustain that process. Once that process stops, the ground is usually pretty wrecked. And obviously there's quite a lot of externalities as well from that, in that the fertilisers get into the water supply and all that kind of stuff. So you can see there, in terms of the colours, that the OECD countries and the BRICS countries are kind of contributing the most to that. Bottom one is tropical forest loss. That's a whole world picture. And you can see, I think what the WWF is trying to show you there is called the Great Acceleration, that we were sort of plodding along until about the 1900s, and then things kicked off and went a little bit mental. So the graph on the top right hand side is carbon dioxide or CO2 emissions. Should be fairly familiar with that hockey stick curve by now after studying climate change in your last unit. Probably not going to say anything else about that one. Then you've got freshwater use, very similar pattern again. And then you've got marine fish capture, which obviously you didn't really have much data for prior to 1950, so there's not a lot of info there. But it is, again, a great acceleration. And the final one is transportation. So I think really the general picture they're trying to get at here is that kind of an idea of unsustainable growth and use of resources, that we're kind of in most sectors of consumption, we've got to a point that looks like it's pretty unsustainable, to be fair. On the next slide, you will see there are two links there to two different ecological footprint calculators. What I would like you to do is to calculate your ecological footprint using each of those, and have a look at what data it's asking you about. So what questions is it asking you in order to find your ecological footprint. So, and what are the units that are used for the final value? Okay, so I'm going to finish this recording here, go away, do that, and then come back and I'll talk you through the rest of the PowerPoint on another recording.